Welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast, the news review with me, Freddie Ndimuli. Now, there's a new twist in the Ruaraka Land Saga that could be President Uhuru Kenyatta's biggest test yet. Citizen TV has learned that at least 30 top government officials, among them 10 cabinet secretaries, are being probed over the 1.5 billion shilling scandal. 3 permanent secretaries, 3 commissioners with the National Lands Commission, and several business persons are also on the radar of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. It has now emerged that the 1.5 billion shillings was paid out and distributed within a record 20 days. Francis Gashuri with the details.
The controversial Ruaraka land deal has refused to leave the doorsteps of the Jubilee administration, with suspicion revolving around key government officials. But now, it is presenting the president with what could be his first major test on his declared war on graft. Documents seen by Citizen TV suggest that the Director of Public Prosecutions now has a file implicating at least 10 cabinet secretaries in Kenyatta's cabinet over the 1.5 billion shillings scam. The investigative files dispatched to Nuruddin Haji for his perusal and determination, indicating that EACC had identified properties worth 450 million shillings in Meru, Lamu and Nairobi counties acquired from proceeds of the Ruaraka land compensation money paid out in January this year. The list of targeted properties also include 3 vehicles valued at 25 million shillings and houses worth 50 million shillings. A money trail disclosing that the Ministry of Education had on January 20th deposited 1.5 billion shillings in the National Land Commission's account at the National Bank in Upper Hill. The money was days later transferred to the account of Whispering Palms, and a day later, 930 million shillings was deposited in the account of Champions Kenya Limited, a surrogate of the company that was paid a partial compensation for the land on which Ruaraka Secondary School and drive-in primary schools are built. But what has intrigued the investigators is how quickly the money was distributed among companies and individuals amid claims that the payment was unjustified. The batch of 930 million shillings deposited in the account of Champions Kenya Limited was shared out within 20 days. On 31st January this year, 2 companies and 2 individuals were paid a total of 9.6 million shillings within hours. The bulk of the money being paid out on the 1st of January to Sawe and Company advocates Albert Kamunde and Enar Nyamai. In Obvious Limited, Meshak Onyango and Lodges Logistics pocketing a total of 54 million shillings on the same day. According to EACC records, CW Shege and Company, Stephen Masharia and Jimex Company were paid a total of 12.1 million shillings. However, on the 12th of February, 270 million shillings was paid in cash to Yasir Hassan Mbarak, who immediately converted it to US dollars at a Nairobi Forex Bureau. The 570 million shillings that remained in the account of Whispering Palms was distributed to various entities and individuals within 48 hours of payment by the National Land Commission. On January 30th, Albert Kamunde and Company advocates received 119.5 million shillings. John Mutweri remained with 50 million shillings, while Global Infrastructure pocketed 48 million shillings, with Mark Mboro receiving 20 million shillings. A day later, Kenya Arab Contractors was paid 220 million shillings, with Mark Mboro and Sam Mboro receiving 70 million shillings, with M. Lorry Logistics and Mugove Mudzi receiving a total of 17.2 million shillings. When contacted for comment, EACC CEO Halake Wako said the commission was treating the Ruaraka saga as a clear case of theft of public funds, and those implicated would be brought to book. Now it remains to be seen if the DPP will give the go-ahead for prosecution and how far the president will be willing to go with his self-declared war on corruption.
Well, Governor Mike Sonko of Nairobi yesterday, appearing before that committee of parliament, which is probing this matter, said that the land, according to documents available at the city county, belongs to the government. So it is akin to the government paying money to buy its own land. 10 cabinet secretaries, 3 PSs, 3 commissioners being probed for this. I don't know where to start. Probably the biggest one here is involvement or even the mention of CSs. In the first term of President Uhuru Kenyatta's term, CSs were very quiet. No CS's name was directly mentioned. Well, those who were mentioned eventually had to leave. This time, are we seeing like that could happen? Do you foresee that? Because this is just the first year of his second term.
I contend that behind every corruption scandal, there is a reputable lawyer with a reputable law firm. There is an accountant, and therefore the Accountant General of Kenya is on the spot, and there is a politician. So 3 people. The Accountant General of Kenya, representing the role of accountants in this scandal. 2, the Law Society of Kenya, representing the role of lawyers in these scams. And 3, the President, representing his members of his political class that are involved in this. I want you to note that when it comes to major scandals, the politicians involved are not usually MCS, senators or members of parliament. When they are, it's usually, you know, the droppings off. But the real drivers are members of the cabinet.
Wow.
So, Law Society should help us in zeroing in on these lawyers who are used as conduits. Because literally, those companies simply, money is paid into their accounts, then they give to the people who are the actual owners of that so-called money. In the case at hand, doesn't it not shock everyone that somebody went to the bank, colleagues, and drew 261 million shillings in cash? How?
Yes.
The revelations are shocking. Isn't that shocking?
It is. Isn't it true?
I can't even speak well.
But even away from the magnitude of theft or pilferage of public funds, the fact that 10 cabinet secretaries, and we're not saying they are guilty.
Yes.
Yes, they may be innocent, but the fact that 10 of them out of 22 are being questioned or are listed as having or as potential suspects.
Yes.
Surely that should worry the president at this time when he has actually reignited the fight against corruption.
True.
Don't you think it's time for a cabinet reshuffle?
I think reputation of presidency is at stake in this particular case. And if indeed they may not be culprits as yet, because that has to be proved. But the fact that the 10 of them and 3 PSCs and cabinet secretary and PSCs are part and parcel of the government. In fact, they are face of the president in their respective ministries. I think this provides an opportunity to the president to say he is keen on fighting corruption, and he wants really to ask them, to request them. In fact, they should even step aside if it was in the developed world. The moment you are mentioned, you step aside for investigation. And therefore, I think it is upon him now, as the commander-in-chief, to say the 10, the 3 should step aside, so that now we can get into the get to the bottom of this matter.
Yes.
And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for him now to say, now I cannot condone this anymore as the president for and on behalf of the people of Kenya. And therefore now you step aside, 10 of you, it doesn't matter who it is, step aside so that we see how to handle
And he has done this before when he went to parliament with a list and said, anyone on this list, step aside. 10 of them, if at all they're on the list of the DPP or the ESCC for probe or anything, they still sit in the cabinet with him. Surely, don't you think that the president can do more at this time? Probably just get rid of this cabinet, appoint fresh ones?
Well, Fred, let me, I would make my contribution from an insider's point of view. Insider because, 1, I'm a member of the Public Accounts Committee. 2, yesterday, even as this investigation was being carried out by the committee, I was the chairperson of that committee yesterday during the Sonko session, and I've been chairing quite a number of sessions during this particular probe on the saga. 1, I don't want to comment on the issue that there are 10 cabinet secretaries mentioned, because I've not seen that evidence on the table.
But if at all there are 10 cabinet secretaries on that list, we don't know their names yet. We're not saying they're guilty, but surely, even in terms of public perception, the fact that 10, he has a cabinet of 22.
Yeah. Well, like I've said, Fred, I was chairing the committee, and I can help this country and even ourselves here in getting to know the details and where the actual problem is and where theft has occurred. Such that 1, and that's why I said I would take my eyes off the hype and the stories.
that they are either 10 or 20. But I would get to the bottom of it very simply. And I said that I have documents that I have perused. I have seen the evidence, and I know that there has been theft. So end of story. This is not about 10 or 20 or who. About. It's a very simple case. And let me first say this, Fred. All these stories you've been seeing, many of them even running in the media, some of them are sponsored stories.
Yes.
With the intention of diverting attention from where it is. I've sat with Bonny Khalwale in the Public Accounts Committee, and if you want to get to the bottom of most of these things, apply your mind to it, and then you get to where the problem is. The problem with this Ruaraka Land Saga and where theft has occurred is not where the public or people are being led to. It is not a contestation of who owns this land or who doesn't. It was not a question of who or how many people came into play. It is a very straightforward theft, very straightforward. There was an application by landowners to the Commissioner of Land sitting at that particular time to subdivide land, and by law it requires that when you are given such an okay to subdivide land, for you to gain commercially, that you have to surrender a part of that land for public utility. A particular section of that land measuring 13.8 acres was surrendered as the law required, and documentation was issued, including titles, a subdivision plan, approvals, committee meetings, and after that happened, that land became public land. Members of public invested in that land by building schools through their own contributions, through money paid brought in by the city council then, through the Ministry of Education, and so we have those two schools existing independently on public land at one point or the other. And remember, the ownership of the rest of the land is not a question of contestation. So these stories you've been seeing that, oh, we are going to court to ask who owns this land, we are going to do this, to say this land is ours, that's not the story. The land originally measured more than 100 acres. It was subdivided into two. The land in question then was 96 acres. This is what was subdivided to give rise now to a public surrender of 13 acres. This host theft of 3.2 billion, because the amount you see there, which is 1.5 billion, is actually what was paid, and then there is already a pending claim which was just about to be paid of 1.7 billion, a total of 3.2. This amount was being paid for the 13 acres, for the 13 acres which was already surrendered. And then the scheme has been to remove, obliterate, steal documentation that justifies and tells the story of how this 13.8 acres was surrendered. And this is what then individuals played out to make as though this land still belonged to the original owners who surrendered it. And it is by dint then that you find in our questioning, especially like the National Land Commission, a decision was made to revoke already a given authority to surrender that land. And that kicks off the ball. And when that is revoked, then a claim is brought. It is justified that yes, this land belongs to this person, and pay. I said one thing, and that's actually what we are going to be doing even at the Public Accounts Committee. It was the direction I gave yesterday as a chairperson. The director of survey to appear before the committee, come to the committee with the subdivision plan that was carried out, which we have a copy already because it exists. Yes. And if he has any cancellation of that original deed plan, subdivision plan, bring that that cancellation, because we know he does not have a cancellation. So without a cancellation, you already have carried out the subdivision. It has been minuted.
Including the surrender.
Including the surrender. There was already, you know, the school plot numbers. It's a open and shut case. There should be no all these stories about who. I mean, this is a probe that should take less than 2 days to close and say this is.
Are you continuing with the sittings today?
Not today on that particular matter. We'll be continuing with it on Monday on that matter. And I believe once the documentation by the Director of Survey is brought there to show that indeed that land was properly surrendered, it was documented, it was given its own independent ownership, then the story is closed.
So
how did you pay somebody for land that belongs to the public?
So you're saying this media reports about 10 cabinet secretaries being involved, 3 principal secretaries, it is simply hype?
No, what I'm saying is very simple. Then from there, I'm not an investigator. The investigators now can carry their own work.
Okay.
As far as criminal capability is concerned. But on the question of nailing where is the mess,
yes,
where is the epicenter of the theft, it's very simple.
Back to my question, yes. The involvement of these cabinet secretaries, whether in the grand theft or through complicity or through complacency or through omission or commission, surely it should worry the president that 10 of his cabinet secretaries were involved in one way or another in such
that's what I've told you, Fred.
And the question is, do you think it is time for the president to actually reshuffle his cabinet?
As the chairperson who chaired that committee, myself, there is no one time when that evidence has been brought implicating 10. What we did as a committee is we summoned, because this is a matter that was touching on education institutions, we summoned the cabinet secretary for education. But in the story of the acquisition of the entire land, there are stories about an investment that was done originally by Posta and other entities which are government and also compensated, including OP then paid for the land on which GSU sits. But our probe is not on those stories.
Okay.
It is on the 3.2 billion. And that is why you heard me say that there has been a very grand scheme to divert attention. You start telling stories, the contestation here is, this is our land, this is what, you are saying that this land has, well, look at these documents, this is my title. That is not the story. You can have your title. The government is not claiming the 96 acres. None of that part is stolen. What we are saying, out of that land, there was a conditional surrender that was done legally, and somebody has come now to change the story out of that small piece of 13.8 acres and pay 3.2 billion out of that. That is
of course,
the
the investigators and the investigating arms, including the committee, will file their report and give their recommendations. But on this issue, this story filed by Francis Gashuri, saying that yes, the DPP has a list of 10 cabinet secretaries. We're just coming a day after one other cabinet secretary, MPs were demanding for his resignation because of a comment he made regarding another issue on corruption related. The involvement of cabinet secretaries, whether or not they're guilty, yes, just the fact that we're mentioning cabinet secretaries could be involved in this. That should worry the president, if at all he's really serious in the fight against corruption, especially right now.
What is important is for Kenyans to know that today, not just in Africa, but in many parts of the world, people admire Rwanda. And the price the people of Rwanda have paid to be where they are is because they have said no to corruption. And thanks to that, Rwanda has achieved social and economic development that is seen by all who care to find out. I beg that the government looks at the Rwanda national policy for fighting corruption. In fact, Rwanda is rated the 3rd least corrupt country in Africa.
In the world.
No. In Africa. The 3rd least corrupt country in Africa. And to follow that, it has got the best emerging social and economic development on the continent. On the other hand, like, Sierra Leone is #1 most corrupt country in Kenya, in Africa. Liberia is #2, and Kenya is #3. So how do you expect to go anywhere? Just last year, as an example, because President Kagame does not entertain corruption, on one day, last year in February, he sacked 200 senior police officers. All of them, they went. Then we have cabinet secretaries in prison in Rwanda. So when public servants see this, they realize their servants are not people who are in office for personal aggrandizement. We have to borrow from that policy and much more
he should crack the whip.
I think the president can succeed.
Yes.
And let him go and do what they're doing in Rwanda. And we are supporting him. Even when we are against his government, we are supporting him.
Would it suffice if he was just to do a simple reshuffle, move this cabinet secretary from
No, not a simple reshuffle is a wrong thing.
When
the president should just dissolve the entire cabinet. Having dissolved the entire cabinet, I know Mbitang is not happy with this.
I want to comment about the cabinet.
I was just laughing at the way Fred is throwing the bait, because he's bringing the bait so that he can fire you up. But
yes. So he should dissolve the entire cabinet and borrow from what Moi did when things were looking so bad for his government. He created the dream team. You remember the dream team. There are professionals around the president who he can use to headhunt people whose backgrounds the NIS has, and it can report to him that these people can be able to deliver. And such a people are so many in this country that we can actually move our country forward.
Well, the president has, in his first term, he did that major purge cabinet, where at least 3 cabinet secretaries were suspended. But we didn't see a lot coming from that. Many may argue that simply suspending cabinet secretaries may not really be the proper way to go about it, but it could serve as a deterrent.
It does.
Surely, anyone else seeing that the president has fired 3, 4, 5, 6 members of his cabinet, just definitely know that the president is serious this time around, don't you think?
If you will fire and actually ignite and show commitment on fight against corruption, and that is what I'm saying. To me, this is an opportunity. Senator has given a good case of Rwanda. I tell you here, the fact that there are 10 of them are at that level mentioned in this matter, it is true. You should actually crack the whip and say, not anymore. Remember, he is different from the first time. In this particular case, he has a legacy to leave. And that is a fact. And therefore, what will he be remembered for when he lives in the next 4 years? It is, and if he runs away, it's not even about the big 4. If you deal with the corruption, the big 4 will fall into place automatically. But if you continue saying about the big 4, but the people surrounding him who are purporting to help him in the big 4 are very busy hitting through corruption, there's nothing he's doing. I think the best way, and we must mention, this is our country, we love it, we don't have any other country, and therefore the only way is to help and give that kind of moment to the president and tell him, please crack the whip, let the 10 live. We have 45 million Kenyans who are ready to serve this country.
Who are
ready to serve. And the only way is to say 10 out of 50 million involved in corruption, leave our
involvement of the cabinet
peace.
secretary in corruption-related cases, whether or not they're guilty, even in terms of how they comment about corruption, should be a matter of national concern. One of them, Energy Cabinet Secretary Charles Ketera, has come under sharp criticism for the kind of comments he made with regard to how the Kenya power bosses were treated. Don't you think that the cabinet secretaries should be very careful in how they're seen to be involved in these matters, whether or not they're guilty of corruption?
Well, on that first point that he made, there is this doctrine of law that justice should not only be done, but should be seen to be done. If maybe you would borrow that doctrine and be saying that in the fight against corruption, then you also applying the same so that it is seen to be done by by whatever, then that would be another case. But I would agree with you to this extent, Fred, that yes, members of cabinet need to be very measured and very careful, because besides the role they play actually in their offices, they're also face of government. They also opinion shapers, by default. And so when they make comments, they would need to be careful about those comments. They can inform and shape public opinion, and especially in a battle like the one that's going on against corruption. But I believe verily, Fred, and this one we have to say clearly, no matter where we are, that we have said it repeatedly. Corruption is so individualized, Fred, when you go and sit in that office, you've been vetted alone, you've been given those powers to exercise alone, you steal alone, you go and deposit that money in an account in your name, and buy cars to be driven by yourself and your wife and children. It is your, this is your thing. And so collectivizing it, that 10 people go home, 20 people go home, that's not the issue. If Khalwale is guilty, make sure that Khalwale pays to the last letter for his crimes, and people will learn. Now, one of the things that we must be very careful about in this fight against corruption is that as we fight it, we don't give it a loose end, such that at the end of the first cycle, you are going to have people already indicted emerging victorious against a system that we have set to fight it, because sustainability of this fight is key to its success. And such that we make sure that we've gathered and put together intact and impeccable all the facts, data and information that implicates the person that we're taking there. When that person goes, this process goes to the end, and people, as my colleagues here have said, can say so and so is serving term in jail or has paid this penalty for this crime. You see, what has watered down in the past the fight against corruption is you find people going to court, and we have said this even on this forum before. They are charged, they go there, they post bail, and they walk around and then go make 4 or 5 appearances. The next thing you meet them at Java and other places, and maybe at your neighbor here.
And it is a growing concern.
You know, yesterday
seem to be done, but it should be done as well.
Yesterday, I was doing lunch in Ongata at a distance. I saw one of the people from Kenya Power and Lighting who had been on the in the dock. He was looking very joyful. They were doing the nyama choma after they were let out on
the deal.
It was actually celebratory. Let me tell you, it is possible for us to fix this thing. The dictum that Senator Matangi has spoken to is important. That justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. But that is exactly the problem. It is because of pushing that dictum, Honorable, that cases of Anglo leasing, cases of Golden Bag, they are still there waiting. They have not been resolved. You need to go the Ghana way, where quickly the president said, I think it was Jerry Rawlings. It was Jerry Rawlings. Jerry Rawlings said, okay, investigations have been done. You know it is this particular politician, this cabinet minister. The cabinet minister is asked for a plea bargain. He says, I'm very sorry, I have these 5 houses, I am going to return these houses, and blah, 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 blah. It is fixed. When he refuses, then the president would then say, okay, he has refused, let the case go on in court and let it end within the next 14 days. And after 14 days, when the guy has not been able to satisfy the court, the guys were being fired at 1 p.m. in the afternoon at the stadium in Accra. They did that 5 times and Ghana changed. And this is how Ghana has moved to, is it, what do they call that status? You are an economist yourself. First class economy, or what do you call that?
Well,
first world economy.
First world economy. Yes.
So, to middle class. So we have to be aggressive the way Uhuru is.
We need a radical shift.
Radical shift. If we can be able to finish a presidential petition in court within 7 days, and the presidential petition requires that you gather evidence across 41,000 polling stations. But in a case of corruption which took place,
it's a few individuals.
Is a few individuals. You can actually fix it in 2 weeks.
Yes. Citizen TV has now learned that at least 30 top government officials, among them 10 cabinet secretaries, are being probed over the 1.5 billion shilling scandal. We are asking the question, is it time that the president fires any cabinet secretary mentioned in corruption-related allegations, whether or not they're guilty? You can share your feedback on text. 22422 is a number. I want us to look at a different angle in the fight against corruption. And this has to do with Kenya Power that you mentioned.
But
and I'm sure
that statement that you made, whether or not they're guilty,
it is a direct question. Should they be fired? Should they be let go? Whether or not they're guilty?
Yes.
Yes. A section of Rift Valley MPs have once again claimed the vigor with which Kenya Power bosses and energy ministry officials are being pursued is only meant to embarrass one side of the ruling coalition. They were speaking in Parliament yesterday. If my director can help me with that story, then we discuss this.
That is it. It's interesting. That is it. I don't know. They want to pick it.
Yes, on this issue about Nicholas Betts, yes, Member of Parliament, he's come out to say that whatever is happening, especially the Kenya Power bosses, it simply has to do with 2022 politics. Now, that kind of approach presents a risk, Bwana Peter Mathuki.
Yes. You know, that is where the problem is. I want to borrow from what President Obama said yesterday when he went to South Africa. When we come to corruption, you as Fred and myself as Peter, you can only eat this much. You can't eat 100 plates. You can only eat one plate of food. Why do you want to steal and keep over 1,000 plates of food somewhere when somebody is dying of food? And why do we now, when it comes to matters of corruption, it is our people who are targeted? And I think that is where we have gone wrong as Kenya since independence. But it's a high time now we need to personalize and take the matter of corruption seriously. If at all they feel it is Rift Valley is about 22, were they together? And they should come on and tell us, were they together when actually things were happening at Kenya Power? Indeed, you have seen all over everyone knows when you're consuming power and the kind of manipulation and the what things are happening. And the whole CS will come and say, this is targeted, or Member of Parliament say, we are targeting our people. I think it's the high time. President must not be put into this kind of a gimmick. He should come out and crack the whip irrespective of it touches on who. Because somebody should not come and simply say, since I'm in government, I will take advantage of this and start now manipulating, and if I'm touched, I will say, it is our community, it is our people, it is our 2022 that is being touched. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Kenyans, it is Kenya that is suffering. It is a generation, it is generation that are being affected. What is the future of the kids that are growing up today? What are they learning most? Ask anyone, a small kid, what is the problem in Kenya? Corruption. Okay. I tell you.
For a member of the National Assembly to actually call a press conference to say such, say that the way the Kenya Power bosses and energy ministry officials are being pursued is only meant to embarrass one side of the ruling coalition, that speaks right to Jubilee politics.
Well, Fred, first, I heard you say that you're going to call for a clip.
Yes, and my director is working on that right now.
Yes, I would have loved to.
Okay, then let's see it. Let's see it first, so that the senator can be able to comment on it.
It is very clear that the arrests that are being done, particularly targeted to particular individuals who seem to be leaning to a particular side. All this, in the fullness of time, you will realize was just about 2022.
We are not happy of what's going on. With all these arrests, we are reading some mischief on it. And as leaders, we want fairness.
You know, we see some mischief in this one. And that's why we are saying, let us all fight against corruption. Let us not have secret cows. There were people who were mentioned in NYS Saga long time ago, season 1. And they are free.
Kwa Keter, nataka kusema yale matamshi ya Keter, kwa nini yeye ajiuzulu? Ajiuzulu kwa sababu amesema tu eti kwamba watu walishikwa vibaya? Hapana. Yeye ni kiongozi, yeye ni waziri katika Ministry of Energy. We cannot be saying tunafanya haki pahali fulani na mtu mwingine akisema tufanyiwe haki, inakuwa ni makosa. Waziri Ketera amesema vizuri wazi kwamba ile ilifanywa ni mambo ambayo si nzuri.
Senator Motangi, you know, in a better position.
Yes, you know, first I had not actually seen that particular clip, and like I said earlier in our discussion, even in the previous topic, opinion, Fred, and especially amongst 500 members of parliament elected on different platforms, different political backgrounds, is varied. And definitely you cannot deny anyone their opinion. The fight against corruption is a national movement now. It's a call across the entire nation. And this is one vice that this country has suffered from for a long time. And so we have to make sure that we fight corruption. And I would want to really say that the lesser we drew politics into it, the better it will be for all of us. Because, you know, every single case has got its own merit, and we have faith in our judicial system. We have moved many miles ahead from the days when people used to be arrested in the afternoon and prosecuted by chunga at 8 o'clock in the night. Now we have a judicial system that we can trust, such that if one is arrested and they are arraigned in court over such charges, and this has happened in the past, they can be able to free themselves of any of those charges by virtue of bringing the truth to light. And so I would be very hesitant myself to want to rope in or bring in any political insinuation or innuendo into
but
this
is
fight.
out there and it is loud. The fact that it plays into the perceived cracks within Jubilee.
I do not think so at all, in my view, because in Jubilee, we are many, and I said something I want to say again, Fred. There has been a big mistake that people have been forgetting, that when Jubilee was given the mandate by Kenyans in 2018, the first thing that we did before that was we collapsed more than 14 political parties across the entire nation. And there is this wrong notion that is being created, that Jubilee is about Central Kenya and Rift Valley. It is not. Jubilee is a national party. We have got members, representative in Mandera, in Lamu, in Pokot, everywhere across this country. And so let's not try to create this impression that when we speak politics. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know where you're going. You're going to the politics of 2022 because the deputy president is a front runner. That is true. Remember what I said, and I want to say it again as a member of Jubilee. We are aware, we know that the deputy president is a presidential candidate in 2022. We are preparing for that 2022, but between now and 2022, it is delivery of services to the people and work to deliver on the big four and the agenda. And make sure, and I want to say this clearly in the morning so that there's no doubt in anyone's mind, there are no cracks in Jubilee. There may be differences in opinion, but once those differences emerge, we rise above them and do what is right for the country.
Bonny Khalwale, yes. What do you say to this? The fact that an elected member of the National Assembly has called a press conference and actually said this.
The University of Nairobi, our lead teaching and research institution, should now follow this as an opportunity for a study on how not a parliament can fight corruption. I am glad that these days my brother and I, we are out of parliament, so now we are spectators. We can see. Maybe if we were in there, we would not be seeing this. I have no reason to doubt the allegations by those honorable members that this is about 2022. Assuming that they are right, I want to advise them, then that is the more reason why they should not make the kind of pronouncements they are making. Because it is not steadying the ship. They are making it even worse. Because by extension, they are saying this is being done for the benefit of the deputy president. Something which I don't think is true. So they need to be cautious. Some people say, when you have found something where you want it to be, you better leave it there. Today, the deputy president has worked for many years, hard and long, to be where he is. Let them leave him there so that at least the country can start understanding him. But when you give this kind of statement, people start understanding, I'm asking, wait a minute.
How does it connect?
Yeah. Look at the statement from Citizen Today. Yeah? The statement from Citizen Today, the highlight was Ruto allies. Did you realize in your statement, or you didn't get it? Look at your statement.
Which one? The one I've read?
Yeah. You have said.
I did not say Ruto allies anywhere.
I
can read. If I read this one, I would say the lawmakers claimed one side of government is being used as sacrificial lambs in a wider plan to change the matrix of the race to state house in 2022. There was no mention about the deputy president.
I was seeing that's realization of 3, where number 3 reads Ruto allies in scheme. You know, so we need to separate these things. With some of the remarks being made are unnecessary, and as Wetangula would say, they are unhelpful. Why make those particular allegations?
Okay.
I want to end it by urging members of Jubilee that if they are fighting because of 2022, the fight against corruption is hurting all of us, and therefore let them sort out those things in a different manner, but not through corruption that ends up hurting all of us.
Okay. Gentlemen, we've come to the end of our news review this morning, but I'll give you each a few seconds to make your final remarks. Let's start with the Senator.
Thank you. I just want to say this morning that we are breathing a fresh breath in this country now, because we have determined that we have to stamp out corruption once and for all. And I believe this is good for everyone. And us in Jubilee, absolutely across the board, are determined to make sure that this is going to be the next phase of Kenya. That corruption, as we come to take government again in 2022 and deliver in between now and 2022 on the promises we made to the people, part of what I would call now the 5th pillar of this government will be to eradicate corruption. And Kenyans can once more enjoy the freedom and expectation and hope that we did in 1963, 64, 65 onwards, when we gained independence. And our forefathers knew that we can be able to build a country upon which generations upon generations will be able to draw in the gains of the hard work of all of us. And that's the kind of country we are going to build. And we are determined to do that. So let any doubts that are there, especially on this road, because we cannot hide our heads in the sand, that we do not have matters to deal with come 2022. But the smart thing to do, as they say in advice, Fred, is that if you want to drive 100-kilometer distance in the night, you switch on your light and you only drive up to where your lights take you, and by the time you get there, it shines ahead and you can keep on driving. So let's not overshoot ourselves by starting to do what I would call shadow boxing about images of 2022 which are not there. There is a whole distance of 4 years between now and then, and we can do the right thing for Kenya.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. I want to agree with them, but I don't think fighting corruption can be a 5th pillar. It is an operational principle. It should be something that is obvious, should be used to ensure that you deliver the big 4. Because then it would mean if the next government comes and they don't proceed or pursue the 4 pillars or the 5 pillars, then it means corruption continue. So I think corruption should be an operational matter. And as we say, if the new dawn then has been brought in by the handshake, let us live to it and say, now it is about Kenya. It is about Kenya because then we must walk the talk. And if it said handshake meant fighting corruption, then we must actually be seen to fight corruption for the good of this country, because that is what is going to save this country for the generation that is now and in the future. If we don't fight corruption, then the country, our country, beloved country, Kenya, sinks. And I don't think anyone is willing to see this country sink. The big 4 can never be won if we have corruption. So we must ensure that fighting corruption is almost like corruption is criminalized. I would want to see a situation where we see people in law, and the time when it comes to change the katiba of this country, we must make sure that we put corruption as one of the highest crime in this country. A situation where we see possibly the leaders of this country converge in Uhuru Park and say, tomorrow we have a firing squad of those people convicted to be corrupt and let them be fired in presence of everyone. And you see people running away from corruption. You have seen this happen in countries. In China, if you are involved in corruption, you are shot. If in Dubai, you meet somebody without one hand or half of it, you know he's a corrupt person. So it's a high time now we actually walk the talk and take fighting corruption very seriously. That is what will deliver this country from where we are to the most developed country in Africa.
Okay, finally, Bonny Khalwale.
Corruption in the coffee sector makes a few Kenyans multi-millionaires in this country. But at the same time, it killed the lives of the youth in central Kenya. It is because of that that the problem of excessive consumption of alcohol by youth in that area became a very serious challenge, and it remains up to date. Corruption in western part of Kenya has killed the sugar industry. The amount of suffering that you see on the ground is not acceptable. And therefore, if there's anybody in government who doubts that corruption kills the social and economic fabric of our society, just go to the coffee growing areas that I've mentioned and the western region of Kenya. I want to conclude on this point by saying there was a misguided statement from Kenya Revenue Authority that because former managers of Mumias Sugar Company failed to pay VAT amounting to 1.2 billion shillings, the government intends to auction the assets of Mumias Sugar Company. That is not the way to do it. They should first of all go for the assets of those former managers who are known, because the periods when the tax was not paid is known. They go for those managers, they seize their assets, they sell them, and if there is any balance, we are prepared as the people of Kakamega to sell our goats, our sheep, our chicken, and our bulls to pay the difference. Otherwise, they are going to auction Mumias Sugar Company and its assets, which include over 5,000 acres of ancestral land, the nucleus land. They are going to sell it on the dead bodies of all the men of Kakamega.
You know, but Bonny, as you say that, just a quick one now, you know, because it's not a very important issue, but I believe the way to go over such an issue, and I believe we can petition KRA.
Yes.
KRA is government, and the shareholding of Mumias, you know, also remember there was a time when the president came there to inject $1 billion.
Welcome.
So there is no way we would be sitting and saying that the way to resolve such an issue would be to go and auction the assets. There would have to be some arrangement, some moratorium of saying that this is the kind of arrangement that would see this money recovered by KRA, but not definitely by going to auction. The auction to who? Okay. I mean, the auction to other Kenyans.
Yes, for that matter, it's a whole new debate. What's happening at Mumias Sugar with regard to the failure to remit VAT by bosses back in the day. But it is not the headline we're discussing today, but matters to do with corruption. Yes. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Bonny Khalwale, Deputy Party Leader for Kenya, Peter Mathuki, Wiper Party Secretary General, and Mario Matangi, Senator, Kiambu County, helping us look at the issues behind the headlines. And that's why we wrap up our news review this morning. Thank you for watching. Power Breakfast still continues. A lot more coming up, including some sumptuous breakfast being prepared by our chef. Do stand by for that. My name is Fred Ndemole. Good morning.